You know, when you're looking at your to-do list and it just feels like it's a mile long and you just feel like you're drowning in tasks?
Oh, yeah.
Today we're diving into Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy
Okay.
to try to help us figure out some ways to deal with that feeling of overwhelm and to boost our productivity.
Right.
So have you ever heard of the metaphor of eating the frog?
I have, yeah.
It's about like tackling your biggest, like worst, most challenging task first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
Like getting it done before you do anything else.
Right. It's more than just a quirky metaphor, though.
Okay.
It's actually backed by research on long-time perspective.
Oh, interesting.
So have you ever found yourself putting off, like, really important tasks?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Because they seem too big or they just feel too time-consuming?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there was a political scientist named Edward Banfield,
Okay.
and he studied these individuals who consistently achieved their goals.
Uh-huh.
And he found that they would always prioritize those long-term goals.
Even if it meant maybe sacrificing some of the short-term things.
Okay.
So eating the frog really embodies that principle perfectly. It's about accepting some short-term discomfort in exchange for those long-term gains.
So it's not just about getting things done.
Yeah,
It's about getting the right things done, the things that really matter for your big goals.
exactly. And Tracy is all about clarity when it comes to those goals.
Okay.
He really emphasizes writing them down.
Oh, wow.
It might seem a little old school,
Yeah.
but like only 3% of adults actually write down their goals.
Really? Wow.
And they achieve significantly more than those who don't. It's kind of like having a roadmap versus just wandering around aimlessly hoping you'll stumble on that destination.
Okay, so having a roadmap is key, but like, what if you're not even sure if you're heading in the right direction?
Oh, that's such a good point.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this analogy that Stephen Covey uses, the ladder of success. He says that before you start climbing, you better make sure that ladder's leaning against the right wall. I love that.
So are those goals that you're thinking about really aligned with your values?
Right.
And that overall vision for your life?
Okay, so we've got the roadmap and we've made sure the ladder's in the right spot. What's next?
Well, Tracy actually lays out a 7-step formula for setting goals in Eat That Frog. It's all about getting really specific, setting deadlines, breaking down those large goals into those actionable steps.
Right.
We're not talking about just vague wishes here.
Right.
We're talking about having that concrete plan. And one of those steps that really stood out to me is this idea of visualizing your goal as if you've already achieved it.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that technique. It's all about creating a very vivid mental picture of yourself having already accomplished the goal. But does that really work?
You know, there is actually quite a bit of research that supports the power of visualization.
Interesting.
So when you vividly imagine yourself succeeding at something,
Right.
you're essentially creating a mental blueprint in your brain to follow.
Yeah.
And it helps you to stay focused and motivated even when you run into those inevitable obstacles.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all of these pieces fit together. So we have a clear vision.
Yeah.
We've set specific goals.
Right.
We're using visualization to stay motivated. What about actually, like, tackling those tasks and getting things done?
Well, that's where the power of prioritization comes in.
Okay.
And this is where that famous 80-20 rule can really be helpful.
Yeah, I've heard that phrase before, but I'm not really sure I understand it.
It's a pretty simple concept, really.
Okay.
It's the idea that, like, roughly 20% of our activities lead to 80% of our results.
Wow.
But the challenge is to identify those vital few tasks that really move the needle.
Yeah.
And not get bogged down in the trivial many, which I know I do.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in that busy work that doesn't actually contribute much to our goals.
Right. Like spending hours organizing your email inbox when you should be working on that big project.
Exactly. It might feel productive in the moment.
Right.
But is it actually getting you closer to your goal?
I think I'm starting to see why this whole Eat That Frog thing is so powerful.
Yeah.
It's not just about time management. It's about aligning your actions with your goals and making sure you're focusing on what truly matters.
Exactly. It really is about making sure those efforts are aligned with what you actually want to achieve.
Right.
And that brings us to the next challenge.
Yeah.
How do we actually identify those crucial 20% tasks?
Yeah. That's the million-dollar question, right? How do we separate the frogs from the tadpoles, so to speak?
Yeah. Tracy provides a couple of tools for that.
Okay.
One that I found particularly effective is the ABCDE method.
Okay.
It's a simple system for prioritizing tasks
Okay.
based on their consequences. And so you assign each task a letter, A, B, C, D, or E.
Okay, so A, tasks would be those big important frogs, right? The things that have major consequences if you don't do them.
Exactly. And B, tasks are like the tadpoles.
Okay.
They're still important, but they're not as urgent or impactful
Right.
as the A tasks. And Tracy's advice here is to never eat a tadpole when there's a frog on your plate.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So what about the other letters, C, D, and E?
So C tasks are those things that, like, it would be nice to do them,
Right.
but there aren't any real consequences if you don't.
Okay.
D tasks are things that you can delegate to someone else.
Okay.
And E tasks should just be eliminated altogether.
Mm.
Just time wasters.
You know, I've tried to use other prioritizing systems in the past.
Yeah.
And I always just end up feeling so overwhelmed,
Right.
or I get bogged down in the details.
Yeah.
But this ABCDE method just seems so simple and straightforward. I feel like I could actually stick with this one.
It's deceptively simple,
Yeah.
but it's really powerful. And Tracy recommends just practicing it every single day for a month.
Wow.
I think you'd be amazed at how much more productive you become and how much less stressed you feel.
I'm definitely going to try that. So we've talked about clarifying those goals and prioritizing our tasks.
Right.
But there's still this kind of like itching feeling of procrastination that always seems to hold us back. So how do we actually overcome that and get ourselves to take action?
Well, think about it this way. Every job, no matter what it is, has certain key result areas,
Okay.
or KRAs.
Okay.
These are the essential functions that are absolutely critical
Right.
for success in that role.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the vital organs of your job.
Uh-huh.
You know, if one of them fails, the whole system could shut down.
Right. Okay, so how do these KRAs relate to procrastination?
But Tracy argues that your weakest key result area sets a limit on how high you can climb in your career, or really in any area of your life.
Wow.
It's like a bottleneck in the system holding everything back.
So even if you're excelling in most areas, that one weakness can really hold you back.
Exactly. And often that weakness is something that we're subconsciously avoiding because it's challenging or uncomfortable. You know, we procrastinate on tasks related to that KRA because deep down, we're afraid of failing or just feeling inadequate.
That's so insightful. I've never thought about procrastination that way before. So what's the solution? How do we identify our weakest KRA and actually start improving in that area?
It starts with some honest self-reflection.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what one skill, if I dramatically improved it,
Right.
would have the greatest positive impact on my career or on my life?
Okay.
And once you've identified that skill, it's time to start taking action.
This reminds me of something that happened to me a few years ago. I was working as a freelance writer, and I realized that my typing speed was incredibly slow.
Oh.
It was a major bottleneck in my workflow.
I can imagine that sounds like a prime example of a limiting factor.
It totally was. And so I finally decided to just invest in a touch typing course.
Yeah.
And it was one of the best decisions I ever made.
Oh,
my
wow.
typing speed just increased dramatically.
Yeah.
And it freed up so much time and mental energy for me. It was truly transformative.
That's a perfect example of how addressing that weakness can unlock so much potential. It's like sharpening your axe before you chop down the tree.
Right.
It might take a little time up front, but it makes that entire process so much easier and more efficient.
Okay, so we've identified our frog.
Yeah.
We've sharpened our axe.
Right.
And now we're ready to take action. But what about those moments when we just can't seem to muster the motivation to get started?
Yeah.
We all know that feeling of staring at a daunting task and just feeling completely paralyzed.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
And that's where Tracy's concept of forced efficiency comes in.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed how you seem to get more done when you have a really tight deadline?
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes I feel like I work best when I'm in a bit of a panic.
It's a common misconception that we work better under pressure. But the research actually shows that stress and those deadlines often lead to more mistakes and rework,
Right.
which ultimately takes longer and just drains our energy.
That makes sense. So how do we create that sense of urgency without the added stress and pressure?
Well, Tracy encourages us to cultivate a sense of urgency
Okay.
and a bias for action. So instead of waiting for that perfect moment or waiting for inspiration to strike,
Right.
we need to just start taking action, even if it's just a small step.
So it's all about building momentum.
Yeah,
One step leads to the next, and before you know it, you're making real progress.
exactly. And one of the best ways to build that momentum is to break down those big, intimidating tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks. Tracy has some fun names for these techniques.
Oh, okay.
The salami slice method.
Okay.
and the Swiss cheese method.
Those sound intriguing. What are those all about?
So the salami slice method is all about breaking down a large task into thin slices that you can tackle one at a time. Just like eating a salami, you take one bite at a time, and eventually the whole thing's gone.
I like that. It makes those big tasks seem much less overwhelming. What about the Swiss cheese method?
That one's about poking holes in a big task
Okay.
by completing small, random parts of it whenever you have a few minutes to spare.
Oh.
So it's like you're creating these little pockets of progress
Right.
that eventually add up to a completed task.
I can see how both of those methods could be really helpful for overcoming that procrastination.
Yeah,
It's all about making those tasks feel less daunting and more approachable.
exactly. And sometimes those small pockets of progress
Mhm.
can actually create a snowball effect.
Right.
As you start to see those holes in the cheese, you get a sense of accomplishment,
Yeah.
which motivates you to keep going.
It's like you're building momentum without even realizing it.
Yeah,
And then once you have that momentum, it's so much easier to stay focused and productive.
exactly. And speaking of momentum, Tracy's a big believer in actually scheduling large chunks of time
Okay.
for focused work.
Mm-hmm.
He argues that trying to squeeze important tasks into those little gaps in your day
Right.
is rarely effective.
That makes sense. It's hard to really get into a flow state when you're constantly being interrupted or having to switch gears.
Exactly. So if you really want to make progress on a big project,
Right.
block off a few hours in your calendar,
Mm-hmm.
eliminate all distractions,
Okay.
turn off your phone, close your email, and just focus on the task at hand.
That sounds amazing, but honestly, like finding those large chunks of time can feel impossible sometimes.
Yeah,
I feel like my days are already packed with meetings and other commitments.
I hear you. But Tracy actually has a great tip for that too.
Okay.
He calls them gifts of time.
Oh, okay.
So think about those little pockets of time that often get wasted. Your commute,
Right.
waiting in line,
Yeah.
even just a few minutes before a meeting starts.
Oh, I see what you mean. Instead of scrolling through social media or mindlessly checking email,
Uh-huh.
I could use those moments to actually chip away at a task.
Exactly. It might not seem like much, but those little bits of time can really add up.
Right.
And it's a great way to stay productive even when you don't have a lot of free time.
Okay, so we've talked about clarifying those goals, prioritizing tasks,
Yeah.
overcoming procrastination,
Right.
and even finding those hidden pockets of time.
Yeah.
But there's one thing we haven't really talked about yet, and that's energy.
Right.
Even with the best strategies in place, if you're feeling drained and exhausted, it's hard to get anything done.
You're absolutely right. And Tracy's very clear about the importance of maximizing your personal energy.
Okay.
He emphasizes getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, and exercising regularly.
He even suggests aiming for like 10 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
That sounds like a dream come true, but also a bit unrealistic for most people.
It might seem radical, but there's actually a lot of research that supports those benefits of getting enough sleep. When you're well rested, you just have more energy, you're more focused,
Right.
you're better able to handle stress.
Right.
And let's be honest, trying to tackle your frog when you're running on fumes
Mm-hmm.
is just setting yourself up for failure.
I think I might need to experiment with this 10-hour sleep challenge.
Yeah.
I'm willing to try anything at this point to boost my energy and productivity.
I think you'll be surprised at how much of a difference it makes.
Yeah.
And, beyond sleep,
Mm-hmm.
there are other things that you can do to kind of
Yes.
boost your energy levels as well.
Right.
Tracy talks about the importance of turning off the TV and disconnecting from technology for a while.
Okay.
He also emphasizes the power of spending time in nature and connecting with loved ones.
Those are all great suggestions.
Yeah.
I think we often underestimate the impact our environment and our relationships have on our energy levels.
Yeah, and finally, there's also like the mental aspect of energy.
Yeah.
Tracy's a big advocate for cultivating that positive mindset,
Mhm.
becoming your own cheerleader
Yeah.
and practicing optimism.
Yeah, it's hard to feel energized and motivated when you're constantly putting yourself down or just focusing on the negative.
Exactly. He suggests like repeating affirmations like, I like myself
Oh, wow.
and I can do it. It might sound a bit cheesy at first,
Okay.
but there's actually some evidence that those kinds of affirmations can really help boost self-esteem and motivation.
I used to think affirmations were kind of silly,
Yeah.
but I've been trying them out lately, and I have to say I'm starting to see the benefits.
It's all about shifting that self-talk from negative to positive.
right.
And when you start to believe in yourself and your abilities,
Yeah.
it's amazing how much more you can accomplish.
So we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've
Yeah.
talked about clarifying those goals, prioritizing tasks, overcoming procrastination, maximizing energy, and even cultivating a positive mindset.
It's a lot.
It really is. And it's clear that Eat That Frog is more than just a time management book.
Yeah.
It's really like a blueprint for personal effectiveness and success.
It's a reminder that we have more control over our time and our lives than we often realize.
Right.
It's about making those conscious choices,
Mm-hmm.
taking deliberate action, and really focusing on what matters.
And sometimes it's as simple as identifying that one big ugly frog and just eating it.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to do it all at once.
Right.
You can break it down into smaller bites, take it one step at a time,
Mm-hmm.
and celebrate your progress along the way.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling incredibly inspired and motivated to go tackle some frogs.
Me too.
Thanks so much for joining me for this deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new set of tools and strategies to help me conquer my to-do lists and actually achieve my goals.
It's been my pleasure. Remember, the key is to take action.
Right.
Choose one frog to eat today and just see what happens.
Okay.
I think you'll be amazed at the results.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Of course.